Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Side Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
Hello, everybody. Back to the original trio.
Back again. Yeah, you guys had some substitute me in last week, I think. I can't even remember.
Substitute use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You were traveling.
I was.
Well, recently.
I was in the Northland. I went to the land that was so cold right now that they don't have a color for it on the weather maps.
Is that really the case?
It's really the case. The NWS goes to purple, I think, and then there's white, and then there's just clear. So
the Midwest.
I was in Chicago this weekend. Every year, I've been lucky enough to be invited to a thing that's put on by some friends of ours, Zach from Inventables and Fitz from Talk, formerly of Google, who I think everybody here knows. And they do this thing called Ord Camp, and I went to Chicago in the middle of January. When you go in, they have a sign that says, "Takes a special kind of person to come to Chicago in January. Welcome, you badass." And
the very first time I ever went to Chicago was in January.
Yeah, it's a great time to go there.
Oh, man, it was brutal. I was loading some of Chico McMurtry's sculptures into the Art Institute there back in probably 92, 93.
Was it let me ask. I have some new perspective on cold that I came this weekend.
This was not nearly as. When I went, it was not nearly as cold as it is this week.
Okay.
Not at all.
So I left. I think the coldest it got while I was there was like negative teens, which meant, let's see, if you breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your nose, the moisture that condenses on your nose hair freezes on the next inhale.
Yeah.
So it feels like there's a caterpillar in your nostrils.
That's gross.
It meant that I only wear one layer of pants most days because I'm from California. And
that won't fly in weather
my
like that.
ass, when you're walking around, like the places where skin is like, luckily I have a beard and I had a hat and I had mittens, but the area from the top of my beard to my glasses just felt like knives were stabbing it. And then after you've been outside for about 10 minutes, that also happens to your ass if you're not wearing double pants. Let's see, what else did I learn? I learned that if you lay down and make a snow angel when it's that cold, it is almost certainly a mistake. And that it once you get below negative 10, then it's cold enough that your skin doesn't have to be wet to stick to metal. So,
wow.
Yeah, like it started getting tacky when I grabbed door handles when I didn't have my gloves on one day.
I will tell you that when we were filming in Matsu, Alaska, and staying at the Captain Cook Hotel in Anchorage.
I've stayed there.
Which is a terrific hotel.
Fabulous. If you ever go to the Captain Cook again, there's a fabulous breakfast that they do there.
Oh, no, we ate the breakfast there. It was fantastic.
The poached eggs with the salmon hash.
Oh, no, I didn't have that.
This is when you guys made those boats?
No, the boats were made in Ketchikan.
Okay.
That was the second time we went. You know the one thing Ketchikan needs? A bridge. That's where the supposed
Bridge to Nowhere
was canceled by Sarah Palin, but there's an island where you land and you have to take a ferry to the mainland.
Well, there you go.
Anyway, no, that was Ketchikan was the boats. When we were in Matsu, we were in that was Frozen Lake.
Is that when you had the thick boots?
Dynamite fishing on a frozen lake.
Oh, yeah.
Losing the SUV into the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're back at the hotel one night, and it's like 25 below zero. And literally so cold that we're getting headaches going the 60 feet from the car.
You
to
get the brain
hotel.
freeze if you don't have a hat on.
But it was also like we were there in early January, and there was some kind of winter prom happening, and these Alaskan high school students were getting out of their limos in mini skirts.
Wow.
And like walking into the hotel totally immune to that cold. It was incredible.
So
We're bundled and angry, and these like girls are getting out in mini skirts and
fashion's
not
important,
even not even responding.
Did you see that video on social media? Was it Greenland, the airport? That runway that's basically on a strip of ice, and it's a POV video from the cockpit of the airplane.
Oh boy!
As it's approaching, and it's beautiful because it's like persistent golden hour that time of year or something. But it's basically ice on water, and you see this landing strip and the lights, lining it, and it's like science fiction.
Wow!
And it lands on
Amazing. You don't stop. You just skid until you are no longer skidding.
It's a step. So So I can't talk about a lot of what goes on at Ord Camp because it's a friendier kind of unconference thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we've ever actually explained. We've talked about this a couple of times before, but we've never explained what an unconference is. And it's kind of I would describe it as a super inclusive thing, depending on how you do your invitations and stuff.
Yeah.
But they do a really good job of getting people of diverse viewpoints and perspectives and backgrounds and everything. And then the people that they invite kind of determine what the topics are. So I went to sessions about playing the accordion and
Wow.
learning to write a song. And I went to like there were a couple of astronauts there, so I got to go to astronaut sessions.
Fantasy
And
camp.
There were board games and like unreleased board games and old classic stuff. Like there was
so much fun.
Lego Millennium Falcon that was just set up there that people would kind of sit down and figure out. Like Norm and I have done this a bunch with these big projects. It's hard to divvy that stuff up.
Yeah.
And the people there would just kind of sit down and spontaneously figure out, okay, you do this part, I'll do this part. You find
That's
some pieces, I'll do some pieces.
Yeah.
Yada yada. A lot of like novel foods to taste. A local beekeeper always brings honey that she's collected from all around and all
And you
around
get to do a
town, so
honey
you can
tasting?
tell like, oh, this is where the lingonberries are, and this is where this is where the clover is, and all this stuff.
Crazy.
But I got a new sensation this week.
What does that mean?
Well, so you're in your mid 30s, Norm. You're in your mid 50s, Adam. I'm in my mid 40s. It's unusual that I feel something like my sense of proprioception has a new stimulus at this point in my life. Like
Physical sensation.
I felt burning. I felt cold. I felt stabbing. I felt all of the different, all of the normal stuff.
The love
Pretty
of a
much
child.
got it covered. Yeah, the love of a human being. A cognitive neuroscientist taught me how to get dizzy in a new way. Yeah. So
Is this something you can share?
It's like
I
active
can share
body
this.
hacking.
I didn't ask her, but I think it'll be okay. So your vestibular system, your inner ear has three tubes, and they're all oriented different ways, which is why we have a 6-axis gyroscope in our head, basically, right? And liquid sloshes around, it hits the hairs inside your ear, and that's what determines how we feel, where we feel like the center of the earth is, with the point of gravity pulling us down. And if you spin, then what happens? And stop suddenly, then the liquid sloshes up when the centripetal force pushes it to the edge of those canals. And then when you stop suddenly, it sloshes. So, we've all sat in an office chair and spun, right? And then stopped and you're like, oh, I'm dizzy. If you tilt your head down so that, if you're listening to the audio, if you make the front of your face parallel with the floor,
Right.
and spin in a chair and then stop suddenly.
So instead of a vertical dizziness, this is like a horizontal.
This is like a horizontal dizziness. So this
yeah.
is the second
Right.
axis, right?
Right.
Then what happens is when you stop and look up, then your eyes will keep trying to track left and right as you're going back and forth.
So do it with your eyes
sounds
open.
Like I would vomit immediately.
So this is the interesting thing. She said some people are way more sensitive to one than others, to the point that like she said she can only do one of them like a half a turn before she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is
Right.
bad.
Because you're gone if you get nauseous, that's the next 2 hours.
Well, and so we were talking because we were talking about VR stuff for obvious reasons, and I was like, look, I've noticed that there's a real spectrum on the VR world of people who feel no motion sickness like me to people who feel a lot of motion sickness like my wife. And you're pretty sensitive too, Norm, somewhere in the middle, a little further in. But the thing I felt both of those kinds of motion sickness before, of spinning before. The third one was brand new. So you tilt it so your ear is perpendicular, is parallel to the floor,
right? And
then spin in the office chair and stop suddenly. And like you have no sense of forward and backwards. Like don't do this if you don't. Don't do this if you don't have somebody there to catch you when you get up out of the chair, because you're almost certainly going to either fall backwards or forwards.
Does it matter how far?
Just thinking about this,
like off the chair, you're leaning.
So I asked that, and she said no. She said all you're doing is getting getting the liquid sloshing out up on the sides and then stopping suddenly.
Right.
So you hit the hairs. It seems like you can maybe tolerate it more if you're on axis, but I think that's my theory, not official science. So it's a fascinating weekend. It's It's a rad event. I highly recommend people look up unconferences. You can host them yourself. You just need a place and interesting people to invite. You don't need you don't need big sponsors or anything like that. You need a room and some people and maybe some food.
Is it the kind of thing where everyone has to present?
No, you don't. So they have the way they do the actual scheduling is they have an opening session where they kind of say, hey, here's why you're here, to the new people. And then they let usually different groups go. This year, I think they picked even number birthdays first, so you get like half the people out there at once. And they have these big boards that have all of the rooms that are available, all of the spaces that are available, and hour-long time slots in each one. So people take a big 3x5 post-it note, write their pitch idea on it, smack it up on the board, and then over the next like 2 or 3 hours, people will come by and stick those little dots, those little paper dots on the ones, so you can kind of move the ones to indicate that they're interested in this session. And what that does is lets the organizers kind of move the ones that have more interest into the bigger rooms and the ones that have less interest into the smaller rooms.
Yeah.
But it kind of self-organizes. It's really a neat process. And as opposed to a normal conference that goes from like 9 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock, and then you go home and go to a bar or something, hang out with people that you met that day. This one starts at like 10 and goes until 6 o'clock in the morning sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Like people stay up late in the wee hours. People are playing like Werewolf and making music and working on Lego and singing karaoke and all sorts of stuff. I find it always interesting to get a big giant group of interesting people together and let them chat.
What if you're incredibly socially awkward and have a lot of social anxiety?
So this is funny because one of the things that we have talked about in the post wraps of these is imposter syndrome, right?
I think I have it almost every conference I go to.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
I mean, like there's sociopaths and there's people having imposter syndrome, and you're somewhere on that spectrum, right? One of the ways that you fix imposter syndrome is by talking about it, right? Like the cure for imposter syndrome is acknowledging that, hey, everybody has imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is the idea that like that person that I'm looking at over there definitely deserves to be here, but I have no idea why I'm here.
And I have a great test case for why it's important to talk about imposter syndrome. 5-6 years ago, I was having coffee with a good friend who is about my age, and I talked about imposter syndrome, and he was like, "Step there, what is that?" And I explained, and he looked like white as a ghost, and he said, "I thought it was only me."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, buddy, I'm so glad to welcome you to the club."
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that Fitz and Zach do at the beginning is they say, look, everybody's here for a reason, right? If you were invited to come here, your application was accepted, you are interesting and you have something to add, whether it's in terms of presenting or sharing something that you know, or just asking questions or listening and being generally interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no right or wrong, and everybody contributes, and it's a lovely weekend. So.
Wow.
I have a variation on that.
Okay.
The definition you gave of imposter syndrome, of being at an event or in a room, any place where you feel like the other person in the room definitely belongs there and you don't belong. I think the variation I have is not that they belong here, but that someone in my field should be here instead of me.
I think that's very apt. Yeah. I think that's absolutely right.
It's not necessarily. I'm not
that's an extension of someone could be taking more advantage of this opportunity than what I can do with it.
Yes.
Well, so the other thing that they do, and this is another part of being inclusive that isn't necessarily related to gender or ethnicity or religion or whatever, but I think Fitz calls this one the Pac-Man Role. So if you're sitting in a cluster of people and you're having a chat outside in a conference hall or whatever, look to your right and look to your left. If there's a gap. If there's not a gap in that circle of people that you're talking to, make enough room that somebody can just kind of sidle up and join the conversation if they want.
Nice.
And that's something like that is it's good for listening exercises, because I think at least Adam, you and I probably have problems listening sometimes.
I'm a recovering
Norm's a much better
mansplainer.
listener than either of us.
Actively recovering mansplainer. Sorry, what was that, Norm?
I feel the hole.
But yeah, make your circles look like Pac-Man instead of like a circle when you're at a group, and then you'll meet interesting people, because people will see that you're talking about something that they're interested in. They'll want to join in, and they always have something good to add.
Yeah.
So yeah, there you go.
That's really cool.
That's what I did.
Yeah. I mean, I've been much more vocal about the social anxiety that I have and didn't acknowledge for a long
Well, you're not supposed to talk about that stuff, Adam. Jeez.
Yeah. No, I mean, what else can you do?
Yeah.
We got to talk about it, because otherwise we end up with people denying that things like mansplaining exists, and then you're just like, how could you even start a discussion?
Well, I mean, so there's a festival in Portland every once in a while called XOXO. And I think Norm, we've all been there actually.
Yeah,
Adam, we spoke there with the first
one.
one.
Yeah.
So I went to the very first one, and I immediately made a couple of friends in like the first 3 hours I was there, and then I hung out with those people the rest of the weekend, and it was great. It was a lovely time. But when I went back and saw all the people posting about that weekend and saw all the other interesting people that were there that I missed because
Right.
I just hung out with like 3 people I was comfortable with immediately.
yeah.
It's like, well, I've really boned this up, haven't I? And so,
Post-event FOMO.
yeah, but look, FOMO is a real. FOMO is real. Imposter syndrome also real. But you roll in. The next time I went, a couple years later, I made a point to go up and introduce myself to everybody who I thought was interesting and everybody I wanted to meet. And
Nice.
it was a. I mean, both of them were transformative experiences, but that second one, and it's hard to do. Like,
Yeah.
no matter who you are or what you do. So I was like, oh God, I introduced myself to Scalzi again while we were there this weekend. It's like,
I
hey,
love
I met
John.
you at Woodstock. And he was like, oh, right. Yeah, I remember being at Woodstock, but I'm sorry. I was like, that's okay. I
It's
don't
a lot
expect you
of
to.
he meets a lot of people. John does.
Yeah. Yes, he's a busy man. So what do you guys do while I was freezing my ass off in Chicago?
I'm as I will be for the next for the next dozen weeks or so. I'm still in production on this new project. This is airing next week.
Yes.
So by the time you listen to this, I'll have already been and come back from a filming shoot in the desert,
Okay.
Wow.
and then a little trip to Los Angeles to take care of some other business. And the shoot's going. This is just an incredible crew. We're making some beautiful television that's very different than what I've made before, although it will also feel quite familiar. It's really exciting. It's a really, really neat thing that we're doing.
So this is the first time in a while that you've like Mythbusters Junior. I mean, obviously the last 10 seasons of Mythbusters were informed by the first few seasons of Mythbusters. The Mythbusters Junior is informed by everything that came before it with Mythbusters. This is the first time in a while you've made something that was kind of from scratch.
Well, and obviously it's got a ton of the same DNA that Mythbusters does because it's me.
Yeah, of course.
And that's just in my bones about the way that I tell stories. But yes,
There's an opportunity to kind of do something different too,
well,
right?
not an I think of it as less an opportunity than a requirement.
Right.
But also, we've just made decisions to film certain things in different ways, and to choose to cover different aspects of the narrative. And then once it's in the edit suite, then a show comes out of that. We're not sure what that show's going to feel like, right? Like that's the coolest part to me, is that you do your best on set, and then in post, this show comes out of it. And the fact is that the first rough cut of post, I talked about this the last time with Junior, the first rough cut out of post always unhinges me because it's not a show yet.
Right.
It's just an assembly of the story, but it doesn't have a point of view, and you kind of find that point of view in the first 2 or 3 episodes, and then you start to understand what you're working with.
Cool.
And that's been really fun.
This reminds me, did you read that IO9 interview with one of the editors of Black Panther?
I did.
And Captain Marvel, Berman is her name.
Yes.
And it was exactly what you're talking about, but for film. And I didn't realize that also applied to TV shows. And it's with interview, I think, with Charles Pullman Moore, totally worth reading on IO9. But the insights, like what people say about film is true. Films are made like multiple times when it's written, when it's shot, and when it's edited. And from her perspective as an editor, she said she edits a film without having. It's almost like being dropped into the kitchen when the meal's already been half cooked, but she's cooking it then her way, like without any of the direction.
Yeah,
of the
she was saying
director.
she does the first cut pass without talking,
Without
not
feedback.
without talking to anybody, but as a totally fresh pair of eyes.
Yeah.
And that's Martin Scorsese has been very vocal in his career, but that editing is the one aspect of filmmaking that's different than any other narrative art form. Every filmmaking uses all the other narrative art forms, but editing is its own.
Well, I think it's like you have a found footage film. Like you find the editor walks into a room, there's a bunch of footage, and they have to figure out how to glue it all together, right?
But it's not just about reviewing takes and picking out the best take from your perspective as an editor, but also what she says, she reviews like the minutes before takes begin and the minutes after, just to feel the energy on set and what's said between the actors, between the directors and the crew, just so that's how she absorbs the tone.
And if you're curious about this process at all, I strongly recommend you try filming something on your phone, a few shots that you lay out. Okay, I need this, and then try cutting them together in iMovie just
Yeah.
incredibly simple. And it'll give you this gargantuan amount of respect for editors because the amount of finesse you can have in the pacing of a story just by choosing between one frame and the next frame for cutting, and the way a set of cuts paste together. And when you take a series of shots and you find a way to cut them together that you don't notice the cuts are happening, but you're just experiencing a story. Holy cow, it's magical.
Magic, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the documentary that Joey used to recommend when people asked about editing? Do you remember? There's one.
It's the same name as the ice skating movie,
Oh, The Final Cut.
Final Cut.
No.
Final. It's
The Cutting Edge.
Cutting Edge. There you go. Yes. Thank you.
And I like the way you guys workshop that between
yes.
the two brains.
Cutting Edge was a very good ice skating movie also. Topic.
Yes.
But it's a spectacular documentary, and it explains it's almost like Film School 100. It explains both editing history, like why we no longer do establishing shots when somebody changes venue. In the 70s, you would always do an establish, like in All the President's Men, when Woodward and Bernstein go into the Washington Post, you have an exterior shot of the front door of the Washington Post that says the Washington Post there. We don't do that anymore because people know what a newsroom looks like. And if you see, say, Lois Lane and Clark Kent in a Superman movie sitting in the Daily Planet newsroom, we all know that that's a newsroom. It's a bunch of desks with computers on them and phones, and they don't have to explain, hey, the guys have returned to the newsroom anymore. Stuff like that, stuff like how you do crosscuts and stuff like that. All of the things that it's another thing like letting, right? It's a thing that once you understand it and see how it happens, you'll see it everywhere and you'll be able to appreciate when it's awesome.
It's totally true. And so, I was talking to the Post supervisor, the guy who'll be overseeing all the cutting of this show, came on to the set for the first few days, and we spent a lot of time talking. We share a lot of cultural commonalities. He's just about my age, from the same part of the country, from the East Coast, New York tri-state area. And that gave us a little bit of a shorthand with each other. But I also handed him my sketchbook and said, spend a couple of hours just flipping through this sketchbook. This will give you an idea of the way I approach my ideas and the way I approach what I'm working on, and that might be germane to how we do graphics in post. And if you want to scan any of this stuff, we can use that too.
It's just like for the film director, going back to analog, before she went to edit Black Panther, she's got a list of favorite films from Ryan Coogler. Right. And was surprised by, oh, wow, much darker, grittier films than I had expected. But it wasn't like, edit this scene this way. It's like, these are my favorite films. Oh, I now have a sense of what you're pulling from, because it's all...
And that's a really good director, because you don't want to say, edit this film this way. You don't want to sit in you want to let the editor show you something you didn't see about the footage you shot. You want to let the post people. We had this in the last couple of seasons of Mythbusters. We had a little extra dough in post, and Katie, the graphics supervisor at Beyond Productions, just got this incredible charge to, after the shows were cut, she got an extra week with each episode.
Is that when they were doing like the dotted lines and stuff? It was so good.
To layer in all that super graphics, and it added so much dimensionality. That stuff is expensive.
Yeah.
It's hard to do. It's hard to find people that can do it well. There's animation, there's graphics, there's all the stuff around it. But when you really get to spend time layering that in, you make better stories.
It's one of the reasons that like shows like No Reservations, when Bourdain was doing, was so good, because they took that very seriously, and every episode was like edited and shot differently, and they experimented with the formats.
And you felt the Guillermo del Toro. I asked him, how do you run an art department with 75 people? How do you tell each one of them what to draw? How is that possible? And he said, you got to give everyone a completely free rein within a very narrow bandwidth. And it's a great way to talk about working with a team, because you want people's ideas. You want them to bring their creativity and their point of view to your project. It's going to make it better when you have that all those diverse viewpoints.
It's funny. There was a post yesterday, and I wish I could remember who did it, but basically they said, look, we all know that Phantom Menace is a terrible movie, but it's a terrible movie with incredible art direction. And if you look at like the diversity of the sets, like then they posted a series of stills, and it was like Naboo above water, Naboo below water, Coruscant, all the
Right.
different places. The Senate chambers, which is the first place you saw that. Natalie Portman's costumes, and like it is there. Like, if you look at those stills, you're like, good God, man, this movie is amazing.
Well,
It
I
has
told
to
you,
be
a friend of mine
incredible.
told me exactly how to watch the prequels.
Just turn the sound off.
No, watch them in another language with subtitles. Because
Oh.
terrible dialogue is not so bad when you're reading it.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was a trick he taught me for seeing Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah,
And
it
he
would
was like,
be great there.
Don't watch it in English. The script will make you want to cut yourself. He said, watch it. He said, try and get a Japanese DVD and watch it in Japanese with English subtitles. It'll feel totally awesome. And he was completely right.
But the English subtitles is the dialogue from the script, the English
Yeah.
version. It's not like a
No,
relocalization,
the dialogue's
right?
still terrible. It's just less terrible when you can kind of put it in your own head.
Well,
You're not listening to people.
I wish
trying-
it was like a localization where like they
Like
took
they
the
translate it
Japanese and
back?
they translated it back.
Oh, I well, I think you were the one who told me that the not Janet on The Good Place in the second season.
Oh, Bad Janet.
Bad Janet.
I love
No,
her
no,
so
no,
much.
not Bad Janet. Bad Janet. Good Janet's boyfriend. I can't remember what his name is.
Oops. All right.
Um,
Sorry about that, everybody. What an idiot.
Well, I'll show you a video afterwards. Janet's boyfriend.
Derek?
Derek.
Oh,
Thanks.
right. Yeah, Derek.
Yeah.
Derek, whose dialogue Mark Evan Jackson told me they translate into another language and then back into English.
Yeah. Which seems perfect.
Oh, it does.
I always wonder how editor directors do their thing, and I know because Ryan Johnson does that, right? He edits his own movies, I think. Or maybe I'm making that up.
I'm not sure.
I think that it's look. I think of editing. Look, I've done stop motion animation.
Mhm.
I've done it enough to know that I could do it if you force me to. But it's a very specific gene pool of people who need to animate. We've met a lot of them through Tippett,
Yeah.
etc. And I know that's not my gene pool. And the same with editing.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it. I've learned enough about it to have genuine, deep respect for the practitioners of it at a high level. And it's not my gene pool. But like, I could really understand being a director. Steven Soderbergh shoots his own movies, and I totally.
I
Get
can
that.
see
Like,
that,
That's
yeah.
how he wants. That's how he is. He knows he's going to be able to get the movie he wants if he's holding on to the camera.
Yeah.
I just like I know enough about editing from editing videos on the internet to know that I can hack something together and make it look okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a big difference between that and making something that just evokes emotion with your cuts and
Yes.
your shot choices and stuff
Yeah.
like that. It's incredible.
It really is.
Yeah,
I'll
all
give a
power to that it is.
recommendation. There's a great editing blog called Art of the Cut, and the guy who runs it has great access to a lot of big editors. He actually compiled all these interviews into a book that you can find on Amazon. I think also called Art of the Cut, and like things like learned that when Steven Spielberg was directing The Post, he was doing The Post and Ready Player One at the same time, editing both with the same editing team, which is great for them because tonally they get to take a step back.
Oh
And
wow!
know
Get real
exactly what
breathers
they're doing.
between each. Wow.
Yeah.
Have you watched All the President's Men and then followed it up with The Post?
No.
Because those, like in the timeline, those are basically one after the other, right?
Right,
It's
right.
sequentially, and they're shot like they color graded the film in The Post to feel like a 1970s era. It's an amazing. Like I love All the President's Men.
One of my
love
favorite
The Post.
movies.
Yeah.
When the hell is someone gonna go on the record in this story?
Okay, so the editing documentary is the cutting edge. Anything else? I listened
Has Tony Joe ever done a thing on edit? He must have done a thing on editing in Every Frame of Painting. I'm just not calling one up to my head.
Yeah.
I was trying. So we were eating at Foreign Cinema last night, and they were playing Vertigo, San
Ooh.
Francisco's own.
It's really good.
And I seem to remember. I couldn't remember if it was Tony or not. I forgot to go look it up when I got home. But there is an online analysis of a long scene between Jimmy Stewart and a psychiatrist, I think.
Yes, when he's in the institution, and it's the last time you see Midge, I think. She
Right.
walks out from the institution, and then he talks about how he's obsessed.
But this whole scene involves all these camera angles, and Hitchcock is doing all of the storytelling by the choice of angles and the way he's cutting and pacing the scene. And I was watching it at Foreign Cinema last night and trying to remember who had done a piece because I wanted to go watch that again.
Distracting when they play a movie that's too good at foreign cinema.
We've gone there. I mean, I eat there probably once a month, either dinner or breakfast.
Wow, they do breakfast now?
They do brunch on weekends.
Oh.
That is amazing.
I'll tell you a Vertigo story.
Okay. Just before, but one point we went there 3 times in a month, and that month they were playing Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love, which I don't know if you've seen it. You've seen it?
Mm-hmm.
Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. You know when you bite into something and it's so good but different that you're like, I clearly know nothing about food.
Yeah.
Right? You take in something that's so other, it changes your whole perspective on that landscape. In the Mood for Love made it clear to me that I know nothing about color in film. It is an mind-blowing dive into the power of color as as an emotional driver of the plot, like a Stanley Donen film. It's so incredible. And Wong Kar-wai used the same DP for a lot of films. An Australian man whose name escapes me right off the top of my head, but In the Mood for Love.
He did a Hero as well.
What's
I
that?
believe. He was the
Is it the same DP?
Oh,
Yes,
really? Okay.
I think you're right. Such an amazing film.
It's an incredible film.
I barely remember what I ate because In the Mood for Love is so distractingly lovely on screen.
Yeah, I guess that makes watching films in foreign cinema and having that sense memory, it's a synesthetic experience. As you're eating some delicious food,
right.
You're being evoked in the corner of your eye.
Having your no-hito and
well, it's Inception, right? They're incepting a feeling into you with food, and then they're also glomming onto a movie that's spectacular often.
I watched Vertigo recently. It was on TV with my housemates who had not seen it before.
I haven't seen it in
And it was
years.
like near the end of the film. I was like, I don't get this film. And so I jumped up out of my couch and I had the remote. And you know how on like DVR, you can, on like YouTube TV or something, you can scroll back and forth and you see like on Netflix and you see the small thumbnail.
Yeah.
I used the thumbnail as the PowerPoint presentation as I jumped back and forth to point out points of the film. And went on a 15-minute explanation about the restaurant scene and then the glowing in the green and then the male gaze and it was an easy way to go back and forth.
Wow.
That is neat.
Yeah, and then I sat back down.
You're reminding me that in high school, my best friend wanted to show me Quadrophenia, and we were watching Quadrophenia, and I was like, "Oh, is that Sting? Oh my God, I think that's Sting." And he was like, "Okay," and he paused it, and he was like, "I don't think you understand. Quadrophenia is on the television, and you're talking. Please stop." Oh no, he was a little bit of a dick.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had the exact opposite experience. I watched Star Trek Discovery on the plane,
Yeah.
and I hadn't watched Star Trek Discovery yet,
The TV show.
the TV show. And I think you told me it starts slow and then it gets okay, and that's accurate. That's all I got. I got no feedback other than that. It's okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. That was
okay.
awesome. Thank you.
No.
Will, for that.
Okay. Here's my analysis of the first 10 episodes of Star Trek Discovery.
There are only 10 episodes.
There's 15.
Okay.
And there's 2 new ones now. It is an interesting premise with I have some real problems with the early character development. They introduce characters solely for you to hate and then redeem them over the next 2 episodes of each after the introduction of the character. And it doesn't, unlike every other Trek, which starts out with, hey, here's a crew that is a unified, cohesive team. This one starts, and this is maybe a spoiler, but it happens in the first 30 minutes with a mutiny, which doesn't seem very Roddenberry.
Plot-wise, it's not
it's
great.
not good.
Not great.
After you get past the first 5 episodes, so far of the first 10 episodes, which I've watched, they've had maybe 2 episodes that feel like classic Trek. And then the rest of them feel like a war movie. Ooh. It feels a little bit like a submarine movie, a lot from a 60s, like Run Silent, Run Deep. Older than that. Yeah. Run Silent, Run Deep. A little more tense, a little bit less, let's send the new kid down into the bowels to die.
Yeah. Wow.
It gets kind of intense and then deals with some philosophical stuff that isn't entirely vapid.
Speaking of submarine movies, the star of one of the great ones, Crimson Tide.
Oh yeah.
Turn
your key, sir.
Gene Hackman turned, I think, 89 the other day.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I know. Gene
Also,
Hackman is
The French
a
Connection.
national treasure.
and,
I'm a huge.
You know,
Gene Hackman is like. We've talked about this before, but there are actors that whenever they're in a movie, you know that movie's going to be better. And there are people like Aaron Eckhart, Don Cheadle, Gene Hackman. You put them in any movie, any role, and they're going to do something interesting with it. William Fichtner is another
Yes.
one.
was Gene Hackman in Conspiracy Theory or Enemy of the State?
Enemy of the State. And in Enemy of the State, he actually played the same character, Harry Call, that he played in Coppola's The Conversation.
Wait, what? Really?
Yes.
Oh, I had no idea.
Oh, well, okay, it's kind of done as an Easter egg, but however, when you see Gene Hackman's character's early youthful ID, they're using a picture of Harry Call from The Conversation.
Oh my God.
So headcanon,
Wow.
potentially Easter
Yes.
egg.
Yeah.
Also,
Wow.
Poseidon Adventure.
Poseidon Adventure.
Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah.
French Connection is my favorite.
Lex
French
Luthor. Come on,
Connection.
Superman.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and tell you those early Superman movies. When you go back and watch them now, they're not as good as you remember them being.
He does get a great rhetorical flourish in the first Superman movie where he says, because he wants to detonate some nuclear explosives and drop California into the Pacific Ocean, he says, "It's okay, Superman. We all have our faults. Mine's in California."
Nice.
I always liked that joke. I got that joke. When the movie came out, I got that joke. It made me feel good.
It's a very comic.
Totally.
We're gonna pull something from the comic books and put it in this film. Here we
Yep.
go, says Richard Donner.
Completely.
Hey, pulled it off.
But Gene Hackman also comes out of that 1970s. I feel like he's a direct result of the Cassavetes revolution, where in the early 70s, Hollywood started casting what they thought of as ugly people like Dustin Hoffman in
the
these
uglies.
big roles because they were great actors, but they weren't pretty.
Yeah.
And Hackman comes out of, I think, that early indie film shift in the way we made movies.
So they thought Hackman wasn't an attractive man.
Yep. Look, I mean, this is on a continuum.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you have Cary Grant over here, then
Right.
Gene Hackman is a
That's-
low-level chud.
Yeah, he's kind of like
Yeah.
a troll,
Yeah.
standing next to Cary Grant or Robert Redford.
And they were both together in the maybe not classic film Runaway Jury with John Cusack.
Wow.
In
Is
which
that the
they-
John Grisham movie? That's based on a John Grisham
I
book?
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Runaway Jury is a John Grisham film, but wait, which one is Runaway Jury?
Runaway Jury is the one where they load the jury, and John Cusack and I believe Rachel Weisz are in on it to get him on the jury.
Man, that's a hell of a
to-
cast.
To make the right call, and Gene Hackman plays like the agent, the operative who behind the scenes tries to load the jury and get the defense, and then Dustin Hoffman is the good-hearted prosecutor.
So the secret of John Grisham novels is that there are three good ones. There's The Firm, made into a okay movie with Tom Cruise.
I was about to say, is it bookended by Thor's as well?
It is not bookended by Thor's. There's a Time to Kill, which is the one that got made into the movie with Sam Jackson, which is amazing.
Sam Jackson, Matthew McConaughey,
Yeah.
Sandra Bullock, terrific movie.
Exceptional movie. And then the last one is Pelican Brief.
Pelican Brief, phenomenal
With Julia
book.
Roberts.
Wonderful movie
Yes.
with Denzel Washington and
Yes.
Julia Roberts, and Sam Shepard, I believe, plays
Yeah.
the professor that dies in the beginning.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah, those are the only three
Pelican
John
Brief
Grisham
is
books
great.
worth
Wait,
reading.
I think I read another John Grisham book that I didn't hate.
Dude, no, there's a lot that you don't hate, but those are the three good ones.
Yeah.
That's send your comments to
The Rainmaker?
norman@tested.com.
Is The
Rainmaker
Rainmaker
is about
Grisham?
insurance. It's great. It's fab. Nothing. It's the best book about insurance I've ever read.
Wait, but this is the one it's the movie starring Matt Damon
I didn't see the movie.
in a Louisiana courtroom.
Maybe.
I made all the radiators for that movie.
Really?
Yeah, how about that?
Who knew?
Back when I worked for Jamie, I've got a piece of one of them over there underneath the.
I always wondered why you had a
Planet of the
radiator
Apes
in the
mask.
shop because it's always cold as hell in
We
here.
made
Clearly
so they'd
non-functional.
shot in a landmark courtroom in New Orleans, and then they replicated that courtroom on Treasure Island for a bunch of extra scenes. And when they did, the 13 radiators that were in the original courtroom, it was cheaper to have us build them from scratch than it was to ship like 1,800 pounds of radiators from wherever they were around the country.
Wow. Well, I guess that's. I mean, no better place to stop that on the radiators.
From the coldest part of the country right now
Yeah.
to fake heat.
And so It just to be clear, it was cold when I was there. It's really, really cold now. It's throw some boiling water up in the air, and it turns into snow.
Also,
cold.
let's please stop throwing boiling water at each other. Apparently, every year, like dozens of people are harmed and burnt by boiling water being thrown at each other in cold
Accidentally?
climates trying to get YouTube videos.
So
Oh, no.
Don't
I was just reading about injuries happening as a result of this.
throw the boiling water at each other. Don't if you try to do the new kind of spinning. Make sure you have a spotter.
Maybe don't do it while you're driving. I'm just gonna go out there and say that.
Good advice.
Sure.
Maybe if you're someplace that's really cold and you don't have to go out of the house, don't go out. Tape up your windows and turn on the heater extra high. And look, I got into a car and the person who's driving was like, "Hey, can you rub your mitten on the inside of the window so I can see out of the rearview mirror on the side?" And I was like, "Wait, the frost that's on the inside of the window that I'm rubbing off is the water from your breath when you rode in the car last time."
Yep.
People shouldn't live here. This is not a good place. Of course, as soon as you say that to somebody in Chicago and in winter, they're like, "It's not that bad. It's it's a little colder than normal right now, but it's not that." And like you sneak up on them when they're talking to each other, like, "Geez, it's so effing cold. I can't. Why does anybody live here? This is terrible." Anyway, stay safe.
Stay safe.
I got one announcement to make.
Yeah.
If you've been watching the video, you'll notice that I am wearing the new Tested t-shirt, which is available now on Cotton Bureau. I'll put a link in the description.
It's very good.
But it was designed by one of you out there, a listener of this podcast, or watcher, reviewers, Karen, who goes by Those Nerdy Design Sketches. She does amazing sketch art, and we worked with her to design this. It's available for the next 2 weeks on Cotton Bureau, or you can find a link below.
And as always with Cotton Bureau, it's print to order, so they'll do all the orders at the end of 2 weeks. They'll close them, they'll print them, so it'll be like a month probably before you at least more than 2 weeks before you start seeing t-shirts.
They're the best shirts.
Yeah, my favorite shirts in the world are from Cotton Bureau.
I wear them every day.
Okay, thanks everybody. See you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks for listening this week, and I want to let you know that this episode of Still Entitled was made possible by you guys. Yes, that's right. You who listen to our podcast every week, watch our videos, and maybe even are part of the Tested Premium community. You make this possible. And another way to support us is also buying our merchandise. We have a new t-shirt. This one is the Tested logo as an exploded diagram designed in collaboration with Those Nerdy Design Sketches. I love this t-shirt and can't wait to see it out in the wild. It's available right now for the next 2 weeks on tested.com/shop. Once again, you can get the shirt and support us directly at tested.com/shop. We'll see you next week.